So we are starting a new series this week, and I'm very serious about it, actually. It's a powerful teaching, and I thought would be so great would be for us to actually follow this book all the way through. So we're going to do 7 weeks on this book, The Eye of the Storm, Embracing Conflict, Creating Peace. Not that you guys need it, but there's people in your life that probably could use this. So you're doing it for them. As I am doing it for you. But truthfully, this material is really the heart and soul of the Q process, which Denise has talked about, and over 100 of us have actually gone through that process. And it's the most cogent explanation, I would say, and process of moving from the person who we've come here to be, the spiritual image and likeness of God, and to be centered in that knowing and that love and that peace and that joy, and moving through the human experience, which all of us must do in this lifetime, to actually be able to reclaim the promise of who and what we really are, that we can live a life of joy and love and peace in the midst of the prevailing winds of circumstances, of the winds of fortune and misfortune which come into everyone's life. And it to me, this particular approach to spiritual growth and development is grounded in the most, in the latest understanding of psychology, including shadow work, and then quantum science, the latest neuroscience understanding. So we're really bringing the most enlightened perspective to this approach to spiritual awakening. And I'm very excited about that because it hits the mind and it hits the heart in very powerful ways. So let me begin by reading the first paragraph of the introduction of the book. No one is against you. This is the absolute truth. You may not believe it now. You may have a lifetime of evidence to the contrary. But until you realize that the entire universe is for you, you may never experience your wholeness and your true worth. The purpose of this book is to awaken you to the truth that there is only one presence and power at work in your life. And that this presence and power lives in you as the Spirit of God. For this reason, no one or nothing can be against you. To realize this is to claim your divine inheritance as a beloved creation of God. Whatever I say after this won't matter nearly as much as you understanding that introduction. Shall I read it again? I think I shall. No one is against you. How do you react when you hear that, right? Because we all have a story, and many stories. But this is the absolute truth, and I would point out that it's a capital T, truth. You may not believe it now. You may have a lifetime of evidence to the contrary. But until you realize that the entire universe is for you, you may never experience your wholeness and true worth. And parenthetically, I would add, you remember Einstein's famous quote where he said, the most important question you can ask, is the universe a friendly place? Most important question. The purpose of this book is to awaken you to the truth that there is only one presence and one power at work in your life. And that this presence and power lives in you as the Spirit of God. For this reason, no one or nothing can be against you. To realize this is to claim your divine inheritance as a beloved creation of God. Wholeness is that sense of nothing being missing. There's nothing lacking. Wholeness. And what you and I are here to learn is that wholeness is not outside of you. that wholeness is your divine nature. Now that works against the part of us that believes that it is separate from God, from life, and believes that in order for me to experience wholeness, my life has to show up in a certain way for me to have that experience. Do we know this one? That it's sort of a conditioned wholeness, which actually is to say that you're conditioning God. You're saying God really is not infinite. Because if God is infinite, then where in you would there be an absence of that? Where in you would there be an absence of love? If God is infinite. By saying that I can't have the experience of love or peace unless people act a certain way or life goes a certain way, we're basically saying that there's a part of God that's missing from me. Wow. That's not the God I thought. Maybe that's a God I made up in my image and likeness. Because if this infinite presence and power and love is infinite, then it must be as complete in me as it would be in the most exalted place that I can think of. It's not outside of myself. It's within me. So this journey that you and I are on all the time is to turn around and to stop looking for that peace and that love out in the world. And that's not easy, is it? It's not easy because there is a part of us, and it's an active part of us, and it oftentimes becomes the default way of you and I responding to life is to react to life as it seems to be against us when we're not connected to the truth of who we are, when we're aligned with a separate sense of identity, when you and I have come to believe that we are something less than the creation of God. And of course, we all come by that honestly because we got messages as we were developing our psyche and we were developing our beliefs and everything that were not messages that were coming from the truth. They were coming through the conditioned filters of those who raised us and those who cared for us and how the world responded to us. And instead of us holding on to this essential knowing of our wholeness, we, in order to navigate this life, in order to feel safe and protected and to feel like we could keep ourselves from being hurt, we took on the beliefs that resulted from us being treated in a way that suggested that that love, that our lovability had to do with how we behaved. And so we began to believe that we weren't loved unless we were being a certain way. So we created this notion of conditional love, and then we do the same thing with this notion of peace, that in order for us to have peace in a lifetime, everything needs to sort of settle down. And that we're externally referenced in our life so much that we forget that true peace has nothing to do with what's happening out here in the world. That Jesus called it the peace that passeth human understanding. Speaking slowly, the words will come out correctly. So when you think about the peace that passes human understanding, obviously it's not going to be the peace that we gain when life goes a certain way. That's the human understanding kind of peace. If I get what I want, then I'm going to feel happy and peaceful and fulfilled. And if I don't get what I want, then it's not possible for me to be peaceful. That's the human understanding. But Jesus said that you could have the peace that passeth human understanding, which is already part of your spiritual DNA. In other words, it's already who you are. We call off the search when we understand this. We stop looking outside of ourselves. We can even call off the self-improvement project. How many people are in favor of that? How many people have been on a self-improvement project for ever? And it's like, I hope I finally get to be that person that I would finally like, or that I would respect, or that the world would recognize, or whatever. The truth is that you have already arrived. And what it is we don't know it. We don't know the beauty of our own nature. We don't know the peace, the love, the brilliance, the the wholeness that we experience when we go inside and discover this. This is what all spiritual growth is about. Spiritual growth isn't about becoming some sort of spiritual martial art or something so that you can manipulate life and you can manipulate people in a way so that you don't have to deal with your own stuff. Well, some of us believe that that's, to be spiritually sophisticated is to know how you can create your own reality. And what I say to that is, yeah, you can do that, but guess what? If you get sold on the idea of creating your external reality, then you will never get this message. And then life will continue to have to be a certain way for you to be okay. And if you slip up on your own reality practices one day and people are not the way you want them to be and life is not showing up the way you want, then where are you? So we're here really to do the deep work of exfoliating all of those aspects that we have put in place and we have come to believe that stand in the way of our wholeness and our self-worth. Would you be up for that? Maybe for 7 weeks? Or 7 years? Or 7 lifetimes? Okay. That's what we're about. So the key is, as I've said, is to be able to be with whatever we are having in our life and not feel diminished by it. And that's a function of what we would say, the big word is consciousness. Consciousness meaning that this is how I interpret this life event. And the meaning that I give to this life event will determine what it is for me. Do we know this? That life and events and circumstances don't have any meaning. Of Course in Miracles teaches this, that I give life all the meaning that it has. So when we realize that everything is neutral until we give it meaning, then we realize how much responsibility we have in order to have life be a certain way for us so that it can be for us instead of against us. So one of the ways that we create meaning is we default to the negative, don't we? We'd like to think we don't, but we kind of do. And what Dr. Gary says in his book is, he calls it gaps in awareness, because all human perception is incomplete, right? So we fill in the gaps in our awareness with our own thoughts and our own beliefs and our own assumptions about life and people. So you don't know what's motivating that crazy driver out there, so you assume that he's an inconsiderate jerk, right? You don't know the whole story, but we tend to go to that part of us that is concerned about our own safety and well-being first. And so we assume the worst. We assume that person was doing something and they were doing it against us. Do we know that that person was doing it intentionally against us? Like this perfect stranger that we've never encountered in our life really made that crazy turn in front of us just to do it to us? No, we don't. But isn't that the reaction we have when it happens? Because we fill in the gaps in our awareness and we default to the negative. Because we default to what we think we need to do to take care of ourselves. That's how we grow up. So we give the situation meaning relative to our own sense of well-being and worth. So there's a story in here. This is, Dr. Gary was the conflict manager for Unity Worldwide Ministries for a number of years. So he would go into churches that were having conflict, and he would try to help them resolve the conflict. And this is a story of the notion of the gap in perceptions and how it turned out. He says, a minister of a large church became suspicious of his board president's intentions after learning that she had called a special meeting during the minister's absence. Reverend Tom's suspicion became more concrete when the board president canceled a routine luncheon with no prior notice or explanation. Later, the minister discovered that she had been snooping around in his office after hours. The church secretary confided that the board president seemed secretive and overly concerned at being discovered. The minister imagined that the board was conspiring against him. He began to piece together other events and conversations that supported the possibility of hidden agendas. He felt certain that his job was in jeopardy and that the board would demand his resignation. At the end of the week, he received a call from the treasurer informing him of a special meeting of the board to be held immediately following Sunday services. He asked the treasurer about the meeting and was told the meeting would be brief and to the point. Tom found little comfort in the applause from his congregation following his sermon entitled, "Believing in Yourself." I'm sure that was not exactly heartfelt, but anyway, he did deliver it. While the congregants were going through the receiving line, he was preoccupied with what would become of the church and his congregation. He wouldn't leave without a fight, he thought to himself. Tom entered the boardroom, and unlike Daniel in the den of lions, he was nervous and afraid of confronting his adversaries. Sally, the board president, asked Tom to open the meeting with prayer. His hands were cold. He felt embarrassed as all joined hands in a circle for prayer. Sally began by apologizing to Tom for the board's not being more open and forthright in its deliberations. But she said that given the circumstances before it, the board had decided to conduct its business in executive session. Sally continued with recognizing Tom's accomplishments, the ways he had been a blessing to so many, and the extent to which he would be missed should circumstances arise that would cause him to leave the church. Tom braced himself as he listened. Sally looked at her fellow board members as she announced to Tom the board's unanimous decision to recommend to the membership that the church purchase a luxury home for their minister in appreciation for his many years of dedicated service to the church. In addition, the home would be gifted to the minister. Tom sank, speechless, into his chair. Tears filled his eyes. His only consolation in the midst of overwhelming embarrassment was that he had not given in to the urge to rally supporters in a campaign of ousting his mutinous board. Have you ever had an experience like that? Where the mind goes to work, yes? You see little pieces of evidence, and the mind that is Velcro for the negative, that is drawn to the negative, puts together a story. And the story is put together according to the me, that little me that needs protection, that needs to be safe, that has been hurt in the past. And we do that obviously to the exclusion of the truth. And so this work that we're here to do is to hold up every assumption that we have, to begin to recognize that the stories that we make up stand in the way of the truth. That nobody and nothing is against us is as the absolute truth if we know that we are this creation of God, that we are the one presence and the one power and the one life. Knowing that how could anything be against you? For something to be against you, this infinite presence of love, that somehow that perceived item to be against you would somehow have to extract itself from the infinite and then stand apart from the infinite in order to be in opposition to the infinite. And don't you know that if anything was pulled out of the infinite, it would no longer be, there would be a little piece missing from the infinite, then it would no longer be infinite. Do you understand how it's impossible for there to be anything against you when you know yourself as the infinite love and life of God? Now, we may perceive situations in our life that are challenging. We may see, certainly we're going to have situations in life that are difficult. There may be situations in life where our body is under threat of an illness or something like that. But the difference between that and believing that life is against you is the difference between taking those things personally and just seeing those things as events that happen in the course of life, but staying solid in the knowing that you are our spiritual being, and that part of you, that essence of you, that pure consciousness that you are, is invulnerable to the slings and arrows of life. Nothing can touch this, who you are. Remember Jesus saying, if you destroy this temple, 3 days, I will raise it back up again. He wasn't talking about his body, even though that's the association that's often made. He was talking about his essence. That you and I have just, when we forget who we are, then we feel that life can be against us. But life can't be against the Christ of God that you are. Pure and simple. Nobody and nothing can be against you. And this journey that we're going to be taking together as we go through various ways of dealing with conflict in our life are going to give us tools in order for us to stand in the fire, to stand in the appearances of life that suggests that life can diminish us in some way, that circumstances can diminish us, and have us rise again and again into this knowing of who we are, so that we have capacity for all that arises. One of the ways you can do this, just in your meditation times, is to, when you ask yourself, who am I? Is to begin to let everything fall away that changes. In other words, your true nature is not anything that can come and go. So anything that would be in your experience that would come and go or change can't be who you are. Because have you noticed that in your life you see things come and go, and yet you're still there? I mean, for example, let's say you have a feeling of being sad. Well, the experience of sadness is there, and you're aware of the feeling of sadness, and then one day the sadness goes, right? Well, does a little part of you go when the sadness goes? Does it? Aren't you still the same you when sadness comes in and sadness goes, and you're still you? Your awareness is intact. That part of you, that consciousness part of you is intact. And it's been that way. When you were 5 years old, you had a very different body, and you had a very different story. You had different thoughts. But aren't you the same person? The same awareness that you were when you were 5 years old? That all this stuff that's come and gone, but who was the one that has watched it all come and go? Do you see how that's not been diminished? Even the difficult times, there you were, dealing with that difficult person, that difficult situation. And it happened, and there you were, and here you are. This is the beginning to understand ourselves as spiritual beings. It's this pure consciousness. And the same with thoughts. So thoughts come and thoughts go. And if you were to lose a limb, wouldn't that part of you still be here? You're not less you because you lose an arm or an eye or any other part of your body. And this is what we're here to understand. We're to get in touch with that part of us that never changes, that's always in the background. It's always been a witness to the events of our lives, the highs and the lows and the ups and the downs and the great accomplishments and the great losses. And it was never aggrandized by the great accomplishments, and it was never diminished by the losses. What is that in you? What is that of you? That's what we're here to discover. And as we come to discover that and bring it from the background of our awareness into the foreground, that's when we bring forth peace and love and happiness, no matter what's going on. Anyone up for that?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'm going to leave you there, except I want to give you this affirmation to take with you for the words to live by for the week. Here we go. Let's read this together, shall we? I am a whole and perfect child of God, and no one is against me. I am not my experience. I am always greater than my challenges. Centered in my true nature, I know my wholeness, and all is well. Yes? Yes. Namaste. Thank you.